Not everything from God is public. Not every blessing makes noise when it arrives. Some things are so holy, so weighty, so laced with eternal purpose that heaven must disguise them until the one who carries them has been fully purified by the process. That's what you've been going through, isn't it? While others were asking why you haven't blown up yet, why you're still hidden, or why your breakthrough seems delayed, you knew deep down something greater was being guarded. You've always known you weren't built like everyone else. What if the very thing that made you feel left out was actually heaven's way of keeping you set apart? What if your hiddenness wasn't punishment, but preservation? What if God was never ignoring you, but protecting the rare thing inside you from exposure too soon? This isn't just a message. It's a summons to every chosen soul who has supported this sacred space, especially through super thanks. I don't just see your gift, I feel your alignment. You are helping preserve what God is building here, a space for the rare ones to remember who they are. Now lean in closer, because this is not for the curious, it's for the called. The kind of gift I'm talking about isn't given to the comfortable, the popular, the convenient, or the charming manipulators who know how to perform spirituality. It's given to those who've been through the back alleys of destiny, who have scars instead of spotlights, who didn't get here by connections, but by consecration. God gives it to those who can be trusted not to turn the sacred into a spectacle, who've sat in silence long enough to hear the whisper behind the whirlwind, who were willing to lose what others call status just to keep their soul clean. Why you? Why did heaven single you out for this level of weight? Why was your training so private, so painful, yet so precise? Why does it feel like everything in your life has been stripped down to the bone just so something invisible could rise in its place? The answer will shake you. What God gives to the rare ones carries more than just favor. It carries fire. Only those who've survived the crushing can carry it without misusing it. So, what is this rare gift? What has God hidden inside you so long that even you questioned if it was real? Why does your presence shift rooms, agitate pretenders, and draw spiritual warfare you never asked for? You're about to find out. The weight you carry is not a mistake. The long path was not a punishment. And what you've been entrusted with isn't just rare, it's royal. Let's go deeper. What comes next was sealed with your name before you even knew you were chosen. You've always heard about love, its vastness, its healing power, how it meets you in your frailty and wraps you in acceptance. But what if something deeper has been given to you? Something rarer than love itself? What if what you carry isn't just a result of love, but of trust, divine, deliberate, and irrevocable? Love may rescue, but trust appoints. Trust says, I see what others overlook. I know the weight of your soul, and I still choose you. Can you feel the difference when God loves you? You're embraced. When He trusts you, you're activated. This trust isn't based on public applause, achievements, or popularity. It's based on what God knows about you in secret, the part of you you haven't even fully grown into yet. Have you ever asked why you feel watched, weighed, and tested, even in seasons of silence? Why does the load you bear seem disproportionately heavy compared to others. God doesn't entrust the fragile with holy burdens. He entrusts the rare, like Moses, trusted to carry a staff that could part seas, Exodus 14:21, or Mary, entrusted to carry the Messiah in her womb while still a teenager, Luke 1:30-31. They weren't merely loved, they were trusted. That trust set them apart, not for ease, but for elevation. You were never chosen because your life would be easy, but because your soul could hold divine weight. Not the weight of success as the world defines it, but the weight of assignments camouflaged as agony. Isn't that what happened with Jeremiah? He cried, "Ah, Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a youth." Jeremiah 1:6. Yet God placed prophetic fire in his bones. He didn't need to be ready. He needed to be available. Could that be what's happening to you right now? You might feel unseen, but trust is never loud. It's intimate. Breathing in hidden spaces. It doesn't require confirmation. It becomes confirmation. Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who resisted the Nazi regime and was executed for standing up for truth, even in prison. His quiet obedience thundered through generations. Are you willing to hold your mantle, even when no one claps Clara, a single mother of 3, works night shifts and still finds time to speak life into broken teenagers at her church? She carries no platform, no audience. Yet heaven watches her faithfulness like royalty. Eli, a recovering addict, now mentors men coming out of prison. He says little, but when he speaks, it echoes freedom. These are not public heroes. They are sacred ones. Are you starting to see how rare you are? Pope John Paul II, the spiritual father of a generation, once said, "The future starts today, not tomorrow." He led not by force, but by faith, trusted to be the moral compass of millions. Even after surviving Nazi occupation, he too was marked by divine trust, not just love. This kind of trust is not earned, it's remembered. Buried within you is a calling that precedes birth. You weren't sent into this world to coast through ease. You were sent as a gatekeeper of mysteries, sometimes. The only confirmation you'll get is the ache in your chest that refuses to go away. Can you honor the ache as holy? Can you stop resenting the weight and start recognizing it as your divine credential? Jesus didn't choose Peter because he was flawless. He chose him because he was distarchono daledo pseudo. Even after Peter denied him 3 times, Jesus still said, "Feed my sheep." John 21:17. Why? Because love forgives, but trust recommissions. That's the kind of intimacy God has with you. You're not random, you're rare. Rare enough to be trusted with pain that births purpose. Rare enough to be given silence that hides sacredness. Rare enough to be chosen without announcement. When the world overlooks you, heaven leans in. God's trust in you doesn't need a spotlight. It is the spotlight. You didn't just come out of it alive. You came out clean. You carried your truth through fire and never let it melt. Your hands didn't harden into fists. Your heart didn't calcify into bitterness. You still feel. You still hope. You still believe. Do you realize how rare that is in a world that rewards numbness? What kind of soul walks through betrayal and doesn't lose its ability to bless? who survives collapse yet refuses to become a cynic. You didn't just survive. You survived soft. You survived sacred, like Joseph, who rose from the pit to Pharaoh's palace, Genesis 41, but never allowed power to poison his heart. Even when his brothers bowed before him, his first impulse was mercy, not revenge. He wept, forgave, and embraced the same ones who discarded him. Can you see now why you weren't broken? Only buried the things you carried, silent and unseen, weren't punishments, they were proof. Divine documentation that your shoulders could bear what others would drop in fear. Not because you were flawless, but because you were formed differently, like Ruth, who carried grief, widowhood, and displacement yet stayed loyal to Naomi, positioning herself in a lineage that would birth the Messiah. Ruth 4:13-17. Was it ever about pain or placement? What if the ache in your chest has been heaven's seal? What if the nights you cried alone were classrooms in disguise, like a monarch butterfly breaking out of its chrysalis? Your isolation wasn't abandonment, it was transformation. The pressure on your wings wasn't cruelty, it was preparation. Do you still think your story is ordinary, Tina? A quiet hospital janitor, spent 3 decades cleaning rooms no one thanked her for. But every patient she touched, with a word of encouragement, left a little more whole. One day, a nurse who had struggled with suicidal thoughts told her, "It was your smile every night that gave me one more day." Tina was never applauded, but heaven clapped every time she showed up. Omar, a former foster child, now leads a community center for troubled youth. When asked how he keeps going despite threats, funding cuts, and burnout, he said, "Because I remember being the kid no one remembered." He carries the weight not with bitterness, but with burdened compassion. Isn't that what real strength looks like, Immaculée Ilibagiza, the Rwandan genocide survivor and author of Left to Tell? Spent 91 days hiding in a bathroom with 7 other women. She lost her entire family, but not her faith. She taught herself English through a Bible and emerged preaching forgiveness. Her story didn't end with survival. It was sealed by sacred endurance. Can you sense how your own scars might be sacred too? The psalmist wrote, "Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy." Psalm 126:5. Paul declared, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, struck down, but not destroyed." Corinthians 4:8-9. These aren't just verses. They are spiritual fingerprints on your journey. You live them. You wear them. You've become them. You weren't better. You were set apart. You weren't loud. You were anointed in silence. The things you lifted without help, the emotional weights, the spiritual battles, the identity questions no one noticed, those were the service of heaven. Do you realize what it says about your design? That you're still here, still open, still loving. Your softness is not weakness. It's your signature, your evidence. You made it through without losing your humanity. In a world that teaches survival as hardness, that makes you holy. The truth is wild. You never applied for this life. You never asked to carry dreams that feel ancient or to wake up with grief that doesn't match your personal timeline. Sometimes you wonder, why do I feel things that never happened to me? Why does it seem like I inherited sorrow from generations I never met? This wasn't something you chose. You were chosen. You were selected to carry revelation you didn't request, to interpret atmospheres without words, to bear burdens that never introduced themselves politely. That's why, when rooms grow noisy, you withdraw, not out of fear, but clarity. Why stay in a space that confuses noise for depth? Why perform joy when you're carrying frequencies too sacred to fake? When someone asks why your smile doesn't always signal ease, it's because it never had to. Your smile is a boundary, not a broadcast. You've learned how to protect sacred space with grace. When they wonder how you can be so tender, yet unmovable, it's because softness and steel were forged inside you like parallel rivers. You weren't trained in comfort. You were formed in fire, like Esther, who never asked to be queen. She never auditioned to save a people. Yet when the time came, she said yes and walked into a palace filled with risk and divine purpose. If I perish, I perish. She whispered Esther 4:16. That's not fearlessness, that's trust. Trust that when God chooses you, He also equips you to hold what would crush another. You've spent years practicing the discipline of invisibility, being your own witness when the room went silent, holding your clarity in secret. Who taught you how to do that? Who showed you how to listen between sentences and discern motives that never found words? That isn't normal perception. It's prophetic wiring. Have you ever wondered why you feel exhausted after being around people too long? Why certain faces seem to drain you while others ignite you? Catherine, a trauma counselor, often cries after sessions, not because of what clients say, but because of what they can't. She walks through hallways carrying echoes of unspoken pain, and no one notices, but heaven does. Miguel, a retired firefighter, still wakes up at 3:00 a.m. praying for strangers he rescued years ago. He doesn't talk about it, he just does it. He says he's not a man of words, but of weight. Does that sound familiar? Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani Nobel laureate, never wanted to become the face of a global movement. She only wanted to go to school. But when hatred showed up with bullets, she showed up with courage. Not just courage, but compassion, she said. With guns, you can kill terrorists. With education, you can kill terrorism. Do you understand now that those who are trusted often carry wisdom far older than their years? The prophet Isaiah described people like you when he said, "In quietness and in trust shall be your strength." Isaiah 30:15. King David declared, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. My cup overflows." Psalm 23:5. You've been seated at that invisible table for years, learning how to feast while still bleeding, learning how to walk with a full cup in an empty room. Like the great oak that doesn't bend to every breeze. Your roots run deep. You don't announce your presence. You anchor it. That's what separates you from the crowd. Not performance, but presence. Not sparkle, but substance. Have you noticed how storms don't scare you anymore? How you can feel the room shift and stay centered anyway? The flashy kind of trust comes with applause, but the eternal kind comes with silence, with weight, with sacred loneliness. Yet you've walked through every season without dropping what heaven handed you. You never needed to be told how rare that is. You are the evidence. Most people assume divine trust comes dressed in favor. Titles, stages, promotions, the kind of public affirmation that draws applause. But those who've really been trusted by God know better. True trust doesn't shine, it presses. It lives in the silence, hides in the tension between faith and fatigue, wraps itself around your ribs as you carry burdens no one else can name, let alone lift. Can you feel that weight that no one else sees? Have you noticed how often your obedience is invisible? You don't get standing ovations for spiritual endurance. You don't get likes for not retaliating. But heaven has been recording what earth never noticed. Every time you chose intercession over revenge, every moment you clenched your jaw and swallowed the urge to speak in anger, that counted. Every time you knelt down to pray when the heavens felt closed and nothing around you shifted. That was trust in action, not the dramatic kind, the holy kind, the kingdom kind. Hannah, barren and broken, cried in silence at the altar while Eli thought she was drunk. Samuel 1:12-13. No one clapped for her tears. No one documented her ache, but God did. Her womb wasn't just opened. Her faith birthed a prophet. Trust rarely looks impressive while it's forming. It only becomes majestic in retrospect. That's why your journey has felt so misunderstood. You weren't just trusted to hold the weight. You were trusted to hold it well. That's a different assignment. Not to carry it with pride or collapse in bitterness, but to steward it without losing your softness. To walk with a quiet flame and refuse to let the fire touch those who came too close. Isn't that what makes you rare, Robert? A high school music teacher, lost his wife to cancer, and never missed a day of class. His students say his eyes carry a kindness that makes you cry for no reason. When asked why he still shows up, he said, "Because grief is heavy, but it doesn't excuse me from giving." That's what kingdom trust looks like in human skin. Lena, a full-time caretaker for her disabled brother, hasn't had a vacation in 14 years, but no one would know it. Her laughter fills every room she enters. What they don't see is how she cries on the bathroom floor once everyone's asleep. Not to complain, but to release. She doesn't curse the weight, she blesses it. Could it be that you've done the same? Corrie ten Boom, the Dutch watchmaker who hid Jews during the Holocaust, survived Ravensbrück concentration camp. After the war, she spent her life preaching forgiveness. Even to the guards who tortured her sister, she said, "There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still." That's what maturity looks like, not understanding the silence, but staying with God through it. David wrote, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle." Psalm 56:8. Paul reminds us, "Let us not grow weary in well-doing, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Galatians 6:9. Nothing you've endured has been wasted. Heaven has counted every restrained word, every private battle, every sacred no. Like a volcano that burns deep beneath the surface, yet never erupts unless absolutely necessary. You've carried fire without destruction. That's discipline. That's restraint. That's trust. Do you know how rare that is in a world that celebrates explosions and ignores endurance? Have you realized that your restraint isn't weakness, but evidence of spiritual royalty? Trust like this can't be taught in classrooms. It can only be formed in deserts. You've walked with Gideon even when you didn't understand his timing, stayed near when he felt far. That level of maturity isn't common. It's not taught. It's chosen. Every time you extended forgiveness with no applause, no spotlight, heaven noticed. Each tear shed in secret, while your words poured strength into someone else, became an invisible offering. You gave peace when your soul was running on fumes, smiled when your spirit felt empty, held space for others while no one held space for you. What if those moments weren't just episodes of endurance, but spiritual qualifiers? Were you being prepared for a reality your eyes haven't caught up with yet? The truth is, you've been training for realms you didn't even know existed. Realms of responsibility. Realms of heavenly access. Could it be that your hidden sacrifices have been carving out unseen promotions? Could it be that your pain has not been proof of divine distance, but proof of divine preparation? Job didn't just suffer. He endured without cursing God through loss, disease, and betrayal by his closest friends. In the end, God said of him, "You have spoken of me what is right." Job 42:7. What if your own storm has been less about punishment and more about proving to the spiritual realm that you are trustworthy under pressure? Now the atmosphere is changing, but not because God suddenly sees you differently. He's always seen the whole picture. The shift is happening because you've started to see yourself rightly. The fog is clearing. You're no longer apologizing for your discernment, no longer downplaying your insight. You're recognizing that what you once called too much was actually too sacred to be wasted. Fatima, a refugee turned human rights lawyer, spent years being overlooked in classrooms and courtrooms. Her accent became her armor. Today, she defends children who've been trafficked across borders and says her pain taught her how to hear what others miss. Daniel, a janitor who spent 18 years sweeping the floors of a university, one night gave a lost student advice that led the young man to win a national ethics competition. Daniel later said, "I might clean the halls, but I was never hired to be silent." Could it be that your hidden season has been your proving ground? Saint Teresa of Calcutta, known as Mother Teresa, spent decades serving in silence. Yet even she admitted to feeling spiritual emptiness. In a letter, she wrote, "The silence and emptiness is so great that I look and do not see, listen and do not hear." Still, she never stopped serving. She didn't need spiritual fireworks to keep moving. That's the kind of soul heaven trusts with global influence, one that doesn't depend on comfort to stay faithful. Paul wrote, "Our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us." Romans 8:18. Peter declared, "These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold." 1 Peter 1:7. You weren't just surviving storms. You were being refined in them. Purified, not punished. Shaped, not shamed. Have you noticed how you carry peace into spaces that used to overwhelm you? How you can now discern manipulation without absorbing it? How your softness didn't die, but evolved into discernment? That's what refinement looks like. Not losing your core, but fortifying your character. Not closing your heart, but sealing it with wisdom. Like deep ocean coral, you've been formed by pressure in dark waters. Yet now, You anchor the whole ecosystem with unseen strength. You don't require recognition. You radiate revelation. Have you started to realize that what once looked like suppression was actually preservation? This next chapter of your life isn't a random reward. It's the natural result of spiritual trustworthiness. God doesn't throw crowns at untested hearts. He builds altars on them. You've become one, not by seeking a title, but by becoming a temple, not by striving to be great, but by stewarding what was sacred in silence. Here's the deeper truth. The kind few are allowed to carry. God didn't just count your faith. He counted your restraint. The way you swallowed words that could have scorched bridges, stayed seated when ego begged you to stand, kept your hands clean while others threw dirt. Do you realize how rare that is? How few souls are entrusted with silence as a sacred strategy. He didn't just watch when you trusted him. He watched when he could trust you. That's the kind of trust that separates servants from stewards. You didn't just say yes with your mouth. You said yes with your reactions, your restraint, your refusal to retaliate. That's the level of maturity that can't be taught. It has to be chosen, lived, tested. Have you ever wondered why your battles were more private than public? Why the ones who misunderstood you were allowed to stay near? Because God wasn't proving you to them. He was proving you to heaven. Heaven saw it all. The moments when you wept quietly just to keep your peace. The nights when your tears baptized your pillow while you prayed for the very people who pierced you. The hours you stood still in storms so others could believe stability was possible. What the world calls grace, heaven calls trained under fire. Jesus modeled that very restraint when he stood before Pilate and said nothing, Matthew 27:14. He could have summoned angels. Instead, he chose silence. Why? Because true authority doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to perform. Have you realized how your calm unnerves people more than chaos ever could? Jasper, a 72-year-old former pastor, now runs a food pantry out of his garage. He rarely speaks of his past. Few know he once lost his entire congregation to a scandal he didn't cause. But he never defended himself. He just kept showing up, he says. If God believed the truth, that was enough. Alina, a nurse, stayed behind during a chemical plant explosion to comfort a dying man whose family couldn't reach him in time. She told no one. The hospital only found out because the man's daughter wrote a letter after his passing. Do you see now how trust is tested in quiet moments? The world forgets Nelson Mandela. After 27 years in prison, emerged not with vengeance, but with vision, he said, as I walked out the door toward my freedom. I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness behind, I'd still be in prison. That's not just self-control. That's anointed discipline. That's what spiritual refinement under pressure produces. Scripture says, "To whom much is given, much will be required." Luke 12:48. In Proverbs 17:27 it says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even tempered." You've lived that verse without ever quoting it. You've become it. Your fruit will speak, but few will know the roots, how deep they had to stretch in dry seasons, the cost of your clarity, the quiet war behind your calm, But God knows the fire that tried to burn you only baptized your voice. The silence that tried to smother you only sharpened your discernment. The weight that could have crushed someone else became a crown in your hands, like the rare pearl formed over years in darkness, pressure, and stillness. Fix it? You were never handed this by chance. You were formed into it. You didn't just receive an anointing. You grew strong enough to wear it without worshiping it. Have you noticed how your reverence for the assignment has become more sacred than the outcome? This was never a random blessing. It was a spiritual assignment wrapped in misinterpretation, in the ache of invisibility, in burdens meant to sanctify, not shame, but you carried it all with reverence. You didn't drop the mantle, didn't curse the silence, didn't trade your softness for safety. And God never forgot that. Never. Here's what's unfolding now. Not by force, not by striving, not by performance. What's shifting in your life is not a reward, it's a reveal. Because of how you walked in silence, stayed soft in a harsh world, kept showing up even when no one noticed the cost. The frequency you've lived on in private is now unlocking doors in the spirit without permission slips. Have you ever wondered why certain things are aligning without explanation? Why favor is finding you where applause never did? This isn't promotion, it's placement. This isn't about you chasing platforms. It's about platforms chasing your presence. Not because of effort, but because of energy. Not because of charisma, but because of consistency. You've become a vessel that carries more than words. You carry witness. Witness to pain, to healing, to the weight of obedience done without an audience. Now, the same atmosphere you once quietly discerned is beginning to shift around you. Do you feel it? This is where divine trust turns into divine transfer. You're stepping into rooms that weren't on your vision board, and it may feel unfamiliar at first, like you've entered through a back door with no formal welcome. Don't be alarmed by the absence of invitations. That's how God operates when He's positioning a soul, not promoting a resume. Why? Because you weren't invited, you were sent. Nehemiah wasn't invited into the courts of rebuilding. He asked permission from a king, but his true commission came from heaven. Nehemiah 2:4-5. He wasn't trained as an architect. He was appointed by brokenness, and his burden became his blueprint. Could it be that what broke you in one season is now the very thing qualifying you for the next Jillian? A former public school teacher turned crisis counselor, never planned on working in war zones. But when a major NGO needed someone to mediate trauma between child survivors and foreign aid teams, her name kept coming up. Not because she was the most qualified, but because her calm was contagious. Andre, a quiet data analyst, caught the CEO's attention, not for numbers, but for how he handled conflict with integrity. Now, he sits in strategy meetings that used to be closed door. Could it be that the rooms you're entering now are shaped more by your presence than your pitch, Maya Angelou? The legendary poet and voice of generations once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel." That's why God is sending you. Not because of how loud you speak, but because of the frequency you carry. Your being has become its own language, and heaven is fluent in it. Jesus said, You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you. John 15:16. Paul writes, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance. Ephesians 2:10, Isaiah proclaims, I have put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand. Isaiah 51:16. You're not improvising. You're walking into prepared things, pre-anointed, pre-marked, pre-designed. You've become the kind of person God places, not promotes. Why? Because placement carries a different weight than position. Positions are earned. Placements are entrusted. When you walk into your next room, don't flinch. Don't shrink. Don't wait for permission to be what heaven already confirmed. Have you noticed how your presence now makes noise even when you're silent? How your stillness now confronts performance without lifting a finger? Like the tide that shifts entire coastlines without warning. You're not meant to crash. You're meant to reform. You're not a wave. You're the undercurrent. What you carry isn't ornamental. It's foundational. Those who sense it will either run to your light or retreat from their own shadow. So don't wait for the applause. Trust the assignment. Trust the placement. When God trusts you with an atmosphere, He doesn't send you for validation. He sends you for alignment. You didn't come to take up space. You came to shift it. You've already demonstrated strength where it mattered most, when no one clapped. You've already proven you can carry sacred weight without recognition, hold light without asking for applause, and stay faithful without witnesses. But now, heaven is shifting the audience. You're about to be seen, not by those who drained your presence, but by those who discern its power, not by the ones who only understood you when you were serving their needs, but by those who honor what you carry as holy, even when it's quiet. Have you ever felt like your silence was louder than their noise? Like your discernment disoriented those who were only looking for charisma? This next unveiling is not about being useful. It's about being recognized, not for your effort, but for your essence, for the mantle you didn't ask for but never dropped. Can you sense it coming? The moment where the right eyes open and suddenly what was hidden becomes honored. God is not just exposing your gifts, He's validating your soul. Just like Samuel overlooked Eliab and chose David instead. 1 Samuel 16:7. Not for appearance, but for alignment. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. The Lord looks at the heart. You've been readied in fields far from the platform, and now the field is becoming the stage. Amari, a quiet sculptor, spent 2 decades creating pieces in obscurity. One day, a curator stumbled upon his basement workshop and wept, saying his work felt like prayer in stone. It was never about going viral. It was about going deep. Elena, a hospice volunteer, whose presence alone calms even the most anxious patients, has a nurse saying, "It's like peace walks in when she enters." Do you see how spiritual trust doesn't need headlines to make history? Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the Nigerian author and speaker, once said, "Your silence will not protect you, but your alignment will." Now that you're aligned, you won't need to shout to be seen. Your frequency will find the ones calibrated for you. Your presence will unlock doors that strategy never could. Why? Because this isn't networking, it's divine convergence. Jesus said, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town." Mark 6:4. But even when rejected, he still moved in power. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, forgotten in prison, and still became Pharaoh's right hand. Stephen was stoned by the crowd, yet saw heaven open before he died, Acts 7:56. Their worth was never measured by mass approval. It was sealed by divine recognition. Isaiah writes, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." Isaiah 60:1. That glory isn't borrowed, it's born. The ones who are now being drawn to you aren't coming for personality, they're coming for presence. Have you realized that you're no longer seeking rooms? The right rooms are seeking you. Like the aurora borealis, rare, silent, undeniable. You didn't need to perform to be powerful. You just needed to stay in position. Now, the light is breaking through. The ones who are arriving now won't need an explanation. They'll recognize the residue of sacred fire, hear your stillness, and know it came from storms. They'll feel your frequency and know it was forged in reverence. So don't flinch when it starts to happen. Don't shrink when the invitation comes. You've already proven you can be trusted in the shadows. Now, heaven is showing what happens when light meets the right lens. Not to decorate, but to deploy. Not to impress, but to ignite. You're not being promoted, you're being revealed. There's a sacred difference. Promotion implies you climbed. Revelation means you've been seen. This isn't about you rising into something new. It's about something ancient rising out of you. What's unfolding now is not a reward for effort. It's a recognition of essence. Have you sensed that this moment isn't about becoming more, but about finally being witnessed for what's already true? You've carried divine qualities in silence. Compassion that doesn't perform, but breaks generational chains in quiet spaces. Discernment so sharp it shields without ever raising a blade. Patience so refined it became someone else's protection, even before they knew they were in danger. Now, heaven is echoing. It's time to move with the same authority, but without the same weight. Do you feel the atmosphere loosening around your shoulders? The burden lifting? Not because the mission changed, but because the season did. Jesus didn't just appear on the scene. He was revealed after 30 years of hidden obedience. At his baptism, the heavens opened, and God declared, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Matthew 3:17. Not after miracles, not after crowds, but after obscurity. That's the kind of unveiling that's happening for you. Not because you've suddenly become worthy, but because the time has come. Priya, a mother of 5, spent years caring for her bedridden mother-in-law while running a home-based seamstress business. No one knew she was also mentoring teen girls through anonymous letters. This year, one of those girls became the youngest female mayor in her city and credited a woman who believed in her before she knew who she was. Priya never asked for recognition. She just was. Marcus, a military veteran, now walks his neighborhood praying silently for each home. He doesn't lead a church, but demons flee when he passes. Could it be that God has been revealing you to atmospheres before he reveals you to audiences? Dr. Edith Eger, a Holocaust survivor turned clinical psychologist, wrote, "Your pain is your strength." It will either destroy you or reveal you. You didn't let it destroy you. You let it shape you, mold you, refine you. Now, your soul carries the kind of energy that changes rooms, not with noise, but with knowing. Have you noticed how your presence confronts things without a word? How your peace now says what your voice never had, to Paul wrote. The creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. Romans 8:19. Isaiah prophesied, "Your vindication will shine like the dawn, your salvation like a blazing torch." Isaiah 62:1. This unveiling is not optional, it's ordained, not to impress, but to align. Deborah, the prophetess and judge, was not promoted by men. She was positioned by God. Judges 4:4-5. She sat under a palm tree and ruled nations, not with a crown, but with clarity when the time came. She led armies with prophetic insight. That's the kind of authority rising in you now. Not the loud kind, the accurate kind, the kind that heaven trusts. You're no longer moving to prove anything. You're moving to protect what's sacred. Like tectonic plates under the surface, your positioning has been slow, deliberate, unseen. But now it's shifting. And with it, everything above is realigning. Have you realized that you're not just walking into a new season? You are the new season breaking through, like the sunrise that reveals a mountain that was always there. You didn't change, you became visible. What was concealed is now confirmed, not with a trumpet, but with trust, not with hype, but with holy weight. This is what revelation feels like, not a spotlight, but a stillness. Now you move lighter, not because the call diminished, but because your spirit is no longer dragging history behind it. God is not just lifting the burden, He's transferring the authority. What once crushed you will now crown you. Not because the journey is over, but because the hiding is, and you're still who you've always been. Now the world gets to see it. Let me offer you something sacred, something personal, yet prophetic. The warfare didn't intensify because you lost your way. It intensified because the enemy recognized what you were carrying. That resistance wasn't proof of failure. It was evidence of fire, of oil, of divine weight that hell hoped you'd never uncover. Have you considered that you've never been under attack for who you were, but for what you carry? Empty vessels don't get ambushed. Oil bearers do. You were carrying more than you realized. Revelation, discernment, frequency. But now, you're not just carrying it. You're becoming it. You've shifted from vessel to embodiment, from protection to power. Have you begun to feel the difference in your posture? Not prideful, but precise. Not louder, but clearer. Not desperate, but deeply trusted. Elijah didn't run because he was weak. He ran because his fire had just exposed a kingdom of darkness. Kings 19:3-5. Even in exhaustion, God met him not with rebuke, but with sustenance, because heaven knows when its prophets are battle-worn. Could it be that your battles haven't been setbacks, but sacred signals that you're becoming what your calling always pointed toward? You're not just surviving anymore. You're stepping into your spiritual role. Not for applause, not for attention, but because heaven whispered. This one can be trusted with more. When heaven says that, it doesn't mean more attention. It means more authority. Have you noticed the shift? That peace now follows your voice. That your silence corrects the room more than arguments ever could, Kareem. A former youth pastor turned social worker was nearly destroyed by betrayal from within his own church. But instead of turning bitter, he turned toward broken teens, building a sanctuary without walls. He says, "What hurt me taught me where the bleeding was." Mila, a quiet foster mother who's raised 14 children in her lifetime, never demanded recognition. Each child remembers her not for rules, but for radiance. These are the ones who don't just carry oil, they become light. Beth Moore, a Bible teacher and prophetic voice for a generation, once said, "You can't amputate your history from your destiny." That's exactly what your life has proven. You didn't need your past to be perfect. You just needed to stay in position. Now, everything is aligning, not because you earned it, but because you endured it. Paul declared, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, struck down, but not destroyed." 2 Corinthians 4:8-9. David wrote, "You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." Psalm 23:5. Jesus said, "To him who has been faithful with little, more will be given." Luke 19:17. This is your more, not measured in followers or fame, but in flow, not in titles, but in territory. Are you starting to see the power you now carry without needing to prove it? You were forged in fire, but not burned. You were anointed. Now you carry a stillness that confronts storms. Like a mountain shaped over millennia of pressure, you've emerged immovable. Have you realized how few can stand where you stand and still bless the ground beneath them? This isn't about survival anymore. It's about reign, not dominance, but dominion, not striving, but spiritual assignment. You didn't volunteer, you were chosen. This is not about being the loudest voice. It's about becoming the clearest frequency. What you carry now carries you, and you are trusted with more, not because you asked for it, but because your life proved you wouldn't drop it. So what now? What do you do when you've become the vessel? When you've endured the pressure? When the oil no longer leaks, but leads, you walk with it, not arrogantly, but reverently. You move forward without trying to convince anyone of your fire. You speak from the center of it, but only when heaven prompts. You no longer give away your energy for applause. You don't rescue those still addicted to shallow wells. You simply carry what's sacred and let the weight of your presence say what words never could. Do you realize how rare that is in a world still chasing noise? Do you see how powerful it is to speak only when necessary and be heard in frequencies deeper than sound? This isn't about visibility, it's about vibration. When your prayers begin to shift rooms more than your plans ever could, you stop explaining your posture and start protecting your peace. Not because you're fragile, but because what you carry is holy. Jesus didn't throw pearls before swine. Matthew 7:6. He walked among crowds but revealed himself to the ones ready to receive. You've learned this revelation is not for the curious, it's for the consecrated. You no longer bleed for those who mock the altar. You pour for those whose hunger opens heaven. Raymond, a prison chaplain, stopped giving sermons when he realized his silence had become more convicting than his words. He now walks the halls without notes. Just presence, one inmate said. I don't know what he believes, but when he's here, I stop hearing the voices in my head. Soraya, a florist who prays over every bouquet she arranges, says, flowers don't need to shout to heal, neither do you. Mr. Rogers, the gentle voice of generations, once said, you rarely have time for everything you want in this life, so you need to make choices. Hopefully, your choices can come from a deep sense of who you are. You're making that choice now, choosing to protect the rare fire in your eyes, to stop apologizing for prayers soaked in tears, to carry mystery without the urge to decode it for people still addicted to performance. David wrote, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Psalm 23:6, Paul urged, do not quench the spirit. 1 Thessalonians 5:19, Isaiah prophesied, you will be called priests of the Lord, ministers of our God. Isaiah 61:6, that's what you are now. Not just a survivor, not even just a warrior, but a minister of weight, a steward of sacred frequency. Mary Magdalene walked with Jesus through death, silence, and resurrection. She didn't need a stage. He trusted her to carry the first message of resurrection, John 20:16-18. Why? Because she knew what she carried. She stayed when others scattered. Can you see how your stillness now speaks louder than your striving ever did? Like a lighthouse anchored in stone, you shine not to be noticed, but to guide. You don't run into every storm. You stand and become a signal. The ones meant to reach shore will always find your light. Have you begun to realize you are no longer looking for the call? You are the call. You don't need to explain the tears in your prayers or owe anyone a breakdown of why your presence disturbs shallow waters. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to be true. The one who called you knows exactly what he placed inside you. So what now? You walk with it, love through it, protect it, not because it's weak, but because you're strong enough to honor it. And God, He never forgot. And now, neither will you. If you felt eyes on you lately, not human, but holy, if you've sensed the air shift when you walked in, the atmosphere tighten in your dreams, or the weight in your chest when you tried to rest, you weren't imagining it. You've been in a divine evaluation room, not a room of judgment, but a room of discernment, a spiritual place where heaven measured not your performance, but your private alignment. Has your obedience become instinct? Has your tone been steeped in reverence? Have your thoughts been purified in the furnace of restraint? These weren't random impressions. This was sacred surveillance. You were being watched, not to disqualify you, but to confirm you. Not as a candidate, but as a carrier. God has been searching for someone who could be entrusted with influence without becoming addicted to it. Through silence, through inner tremors, through moments no one else noticed. You said yes without words. Esther didn't walk into the palace for luxury. She was evaluated in silence. 12 months of preparation. No stage. No validation. No guarantees. just daily refinement in the inner chamber. Esther 2:12. But when the time came, the king extended his scepter. Esther 5:2. Why? Because the throne recognized the posture of one who had been prepared in stillness, like Nehemiah, who inspected the ruins at night before speaking a single word. Nehemiah 2:13. You've been evaluated in how you respond to broken things. Did you curse the ruin or ask for the blueprint? Did you seek applause or assignment? The fire wasn't random, it was certification. Psalm 66:10 says, For you, O God, tested us, you refined us like silver. You've been refined, not for show, but for stewardship. 2 Timothy 2:15 commands, Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who does not need to be ashamed. You've done that. Psalm 17:3 declares, Though you test me, you will find nothing. I have resolved that my mouth will not sin. That's your record in heaven. Ask yourself now, have you realized the rooms you were locked out of were training grounds? Did you know the silence was teaching you what volume never could? Have you started to sense that the warfare wasn't punishment, but promotion in disguise? What if the delay was heaven's way of protecting your clarity? Have you noticed how your discernment grew sharper when no one was listening? And now that they are, will you still speak from the throne room, not the crowd? Makoto, a sound engineer, worked 20 years behind the curtain before being asked to lead an orchestra. When asked why, the conductor said, Because you've learned to listen for what others miss. Eliana, a midwife, has walked hundreds through labor, but carries a Bible in her back pocket. She says, Delivering in silence is harder than shouting commands, but it births stronger futures. So too with you, like clouds forming before rain. Your weight was accumulating in silence. No announcement, no storm. But when heaven was ready, it poured. The evaluation wasn't a trap. It was a transfer. Now that it's complete, you won't have to ask for confirmation. This is what happened with Chadwick Boseman. While millions praised his strength on screen, few knew the depth of his strength off it. He filmed physically demanding roles: Black Panther, Marshall, Day 5 Bloods, all while silently enduring stage 3 colon cancer. He never posted about his pain, never asked for pity. Instead, he gave the world excellence without explanation. When he passed, the world stood still, not because he shouted, but because his silence carried weight. He wasn't looking for applause. He was living for assignment. That's why he became eternal. Some crowns are given not with noise, but with reverence. You are the confirmation. So what's the verdict you passed? Not barely, not in delay, but in full. Your humility was your armor, your restraint was your sword, and your presence is the evidence. Heaven is not waiting. Heaven has moved, and now so must you. The shift isn't coming. It's already moving, like tectonic plates beneath your spirit. But this time, it won't feel like collapse. It'll feel like calm. That's how you'll know it's divine. The earth may tremble, but your soul won't. Why? Because this isn't just favor, it's entrustment. You've entered a spiritual atmosphere where peace isn't seasonal, it's structural, coded into your nervous system like an ancient seal. Can you feel it? The absence of panic, even in the face of uncertainty. the stillness in your bones when everything around you stirs. Isaiah 26:3 promises, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." That's no longer just a verse for you. It's your vibration, your spiritual frequency. You've traded reaction for resonance. Now, what used to shake you becomes something you interpret, not something you absorb. Most people mistake God's trust for visibility. But what if trust doesn't give you a stage, but stamina? What if trust looks like Joseph in Pharaoh's prison, interpreting dreams no one saw him interpret? What if it looks like Ruth, gleaning in Boaz's field without demanding a title? What if it looks like John the Baptist, shouting in the wilderness without needing a crowd, yet all three were trusted to shift kingdoms? John 2:24 says, "But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people." That's the kind of discernment God trusted you with. The power to feel without bleeding. The gift of silence that produces revelation. Have you noticed how certain rooms don't intimidate you anymore? How the chaos no longer provokes you to abandon your peace? That's because the divine frequency you carry now outranks external noise. Peace has become your power. Alba, a first-grade teacher, carries trauma she's never named aloud, but her students weep in her presence without knowing why. Shamar, a former gang member, now sits in city hall meetings with fire in his belly and gentleness in his tone. Neither wears a title. Both carry trust. The wind doesn't ask permission before it shifts direction, but it always honors gravity. Like that, you've become grounded enough for God to shift you without breaking you. Your peace is no longer delicate. It's fortified. You were trusted with rejection and didn't retaliate. Trusted with delay and didn't detach. Trusted with silence and turned it into wisdom. Trusted with grief and didn't become bitter. What could God give someone like that, if not more? That's the kind of peace Dr. Miles Monroe carried. He didn't clamor for influence. He cultivated wisdom. Through decades of teaching, mentoring, and stewarding global leaders in quiet strength, he proved that true authority doesn't shout. It doesn't need lights or applause. It radiates. Even after his passing, his teachings continue to unlock identity and kingdom purpose for millions. He wasn't famous because he was loud. He was entrusted because he was aligned. Now the question is, are you prepared to carry more peace than applause? Can you be entrusted with greater weight without greater visibility? Will you protect what is sacred, even when no one affirms it? Have you made peace your identity, not your outcome? Do you recognize that God didn't just rescue you from fire? He made you fireproof when the room shifts in your favor. Will you still move like one who walks with God, not with ego? This next dimension isn't a reward, it's a placement. Like rain that knows when to fall, like light that knows when to stay hidden behind clouds. You're not just stepping into more, you're stepping into who you've always been, entrusted, not elevated, planted, not propped, confirmed, not campaigning. What happens next won't be chaos. It will be clarity. Not even an earthquake can disrupt the soil God has rooted you in. Here's what few understand when you've been trusted by God this deeply. Your life starts to defy logic. Doors open without keys. Mountains move without noise. Favor flows through unlikely pipelines. And people who once dismissed you now feel unnerved in your stillness because they can sense it. Something has changed. But the truth is, you didn't change to become someone new. You simply shed what no longer matched your assignment. Psalm 18:35 says, "Your gentleness has made me great." Not your charisma, not your status, not your defense, but gentleness. The kind forged through spiritual pressure, not personality polish. Now God isn't just surrounding you with peace, He's surrounding others with peace through you. You've become a stabilizer in a shaking world, a silent intercessor in atmospheres of noise. Your clarity is disrupting confusion. Your frequency is decoding manipulation. Remember Mr. Hiroshi, the 64-year-old janitor who never spoke unless necessary, but whose quiet presence made bullies retreat and hurting kids feel safe. He wasn't rich, he wasn't known, but heaven knew him when he passed. The entire school wept, not because he was loud, but because he was trusted. Jade, a mother of 3, has prayed silently over her husband's alcoholism for 15 years without bitterness, speaking healing instead of curses. That's divine trust. But there are those like Elizabeth Holmes, who sought influence without alignment. She was trusted by man, not by God. And the structure collapsed because influence without integrity is sabotage in disguise. So ask yourself, am I willing to be trusted when it looks like obscurity? Do I value peace over platform? Have I mastered the art of withholding words until heaven gives release? Can I be the answer in a room that doesn't clap? Your presence will now do what your explanations once tried to, because spiritual trust comes with weight, not volume. Like a conductor's baton, small in appearance, but commanding symphonies. Like the moon, silent yet pulling tides. Like Greta Thunberg, whose unwavering stillness and prophetic clarity has unsettled political rooms across continents. Not with aggression, but with essence. God isn't trusting you with more to impress people. He's trusting you to govern atmospheres, to carry calm like an authority, to speak fire only when necessary and carry dew the rest of the time. What you carry now isn't for display, it's for deployment. Romans 8:19 reminds us, the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. Now that unveiling has begun, not with noise, but with knowing. So let them wonder. Let them guess why things align when you walk in. Let them speculate how your silence carries so much spiritual voltage. They won't know it's because you were trusted in the shadows first, that your crown was fitted in rooms no one saw, that God trusted you before man recognized you. Now, you're not just known, you're placed. Now that you've come this far, not just by strength, but by sacred endurance, pause, breathe, let your spirit kneel, even if your body doesn't, because what you've carried wasn't casual, and what you're stepping into won't be either. This is where you seal it, not with noise, but with surrender. This is where heaven listens. This is where trust becomes covenant. Let this prayer rise from the place only you and God know, Father. You saw me before they saw me. You trusted me in rooms no one entered. You whispered purpose into my bones when I still called it pain. Thank you for trusting me, not with ease, but with weight, not with titles, but with tasks wrapped in silence. I don't ask for a spotlight. I ask for alignment. Make me a vessel that doesn't spill what you've poured in. Teach me to carry it with reverence, to walk in rooms without needing validation, to govern atmospheres with presence, not performance. Thank you for the tears that taught me discernment, for the delays that shaped my endurance, for the seasons where I held peace when no one held me. Let every unseen yes echo in heaven as faithfulness. I surrender again to the kind of trust that doesn't come with applause, but comes with assignments. I receive what's next, not as a reward, but as a responsibility. Let me not waste the oil you placed in me. Let me not lose compassion while carrying strength. Let me not forget that you saw fit to entrust me with what would have crushed someone else. I move forward now, not louder, but clearer, not for attention, but for impact, because you trusted me, and I trust you back. In Jesus' name, amen. And now, chosen one. As this word settles into your spirit like oil, finding every crack you once thought made you unworthy, let the truth land gently but deeply. This trust from heaven was never random. It was precise, generational, sacred. You were never just the survivor. You were the sanctuary. You were never just the one who made it through. You were the one marked by God to carry what others would have dropped, and to carry it without bitterness. You weren't given endurance because you were strong. You were given trust because you were consistent, because you remained tender in a world that tried to harden you, because you stayed aligned in rooms that tried to scatter you, because you kept choosing the narrow road, not for applause, not for proof, but because something in you already knew it's what you were built for. So no more shrinking, no more hiding, no more apologizing for the presence that unsettles surface-level spirits, or the fire in your eyes that comes from having survived your own internal wars with grace. God didn't just love you, He trusted you. Now, He's placing you where that trust becomes visible, not through a title, not through fanfare, but through divine positioning, through moments that don't make sense to the crowd, but make perfect sense to heaven. This next chapter isn't a promotion, it's a revelation, a revealing of who you've quietly become when no one was watching but God. You didn't earn it through performance. You proved it through surrender. If your spirit feels this, if every word echoed something your soul has known but never had language for, then don't keep it buried. Let the ripple begin with you. If this message found you in a valley, let it remind you that heaven hasn't overlooked a single step of your climb. If it found you in a waiting room, let it confirm that the wait was preparation, not punishment. If it found you at the edge of something new, let it be your sign you're not just being seen, you're being sent. If this word resonated with you in any way, I invite you to let your agreement be known. Click like, not for me, but to anchor this moment in your timeline as a spiritual marker. Share this message with someone you know has been quietly holding weight they never asked for. Someone who's been trusted in silence. Leave a comment below with the words, "Heaven trusted me with more," so others may know they're not the only ones, if you haven't already. Subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss another word crafted for your spirit. This space was built for those who walk differently, for those whose souls speak before their mouths do. Whether you've supported this channel with a super thanks or simply by showing up with an open heart, thank you. You matter. Here, you are seen, honored, and deeply appreciated. Your presence is not a statistic, it's a confirmation. And now I bless you. May your peace become permanent. May your trust become tangible. May your name be whispered in divine rooms, not for status, but for assignment. May you walk with a confidence that comes not from what you have, but from who heaven says you are. May you be steady in a trembling world. May your past be sanctified, your present be filled with clarity, and your future unfold like a scroll written in light. You were never just chosen to carry, you were chosen to become. And now, it's time